Lesson 8.4. Welcome, grade 8s, to contributing to society. How does a society promote good citizenship? We're going to find that out in today's lesson. So stick around and let's learn something. So, how can society promote good citizenship? We are going to take a look at how the Aztecs promoted good citizenship and what they valued in their society as a good citizen, and we are going to compare that to Canadian society. Contributing to society. Society was focused on producing citizens who would contribute to the community. This was the Aztec kind of view on their citizens. How can we contribute to our community? In the Aztec world, the group was number one, way more important than the individual. And we know this because everybody was taught that they should be prepared to sacrifice themselves for the greater good of the people. And this was taught in education. This was a part of their education. This is from their education. What I have here, this quote that's below here, this is from lessons that have been preserved. This is from 1512 to 1585. This was a part of their education. Console the poor, the afflicted. Do not mock the old, sick, maimed, or those who sinned. Do not set bad example or speak indiscreetly or interpret speech of another. So what they're saying is, okay, they're saying, like, mind your business, do what you have to do for the good of the people. Don't focus on others that are not a part of you. That's what good citizens do. Okay. At the same time, those that are not like you, maybe they need help. Okay. We have to protect this community at all costs. Do whatever it takes to make sure and ensure that the community survives, and the community being the Aztecs. Okay. The Aztecs believed in 5 virtues for an ideal Aztec citizen. Okay, this is coming to us right out of our textbook. So I'm going to explain each one of these. There's 5 of them: courage, self-sacrifice, modesty, clean living, and obedience. So we are going to start with courage, the first virtue of an ideal Aztec citizen. Aztecs are expected to show courage and deal with hardships without complaining. By doing this, you ensure that your army is strong. They're doing this in everyday life too. Number 2, self-sacrifice. We've said this before. The group is way more important than the individual. Each and every Aztec is willing to sacrifice themselves, but not just themselves, but also their possessions, their comfort, and yes, themselves, for the good of all Aztec society. Number 3, the third virtue of an ideal Aztec citizen: modesty. No one, even if you are the best warrior out there, is to boast about your personal achievements. You don't want to stand out from the crowd. Obviously within reason, okay, because we do have a nobility class and they were allowed to wear certain clothing and things like that. But individually, this was heavily frowned upon. The fourth virtue is clean living. People had to keep themselves healthy and avoid overindulging in food and drink. Wow, even back then for the Aztecs, they viewed this as a virtue. If you are doing and practicing this type of evil behavior, air quotations, then you are not clean living, and that is going to slow you down on the battlefield. This is all coming down to taking care of your body so that you can perform well in battle. And the fifth virtue of an ideal citizen is obedience. Everyone had to obey the people above them without question. This preserved the very important social order of the Aztecs. This was key. How did they do this? How did they keep track of all of this? Well, they had laws. They had written laws, not in an alphabet like how we know, but they had their codices, which would equate to their written language. They had a legal system which was used to maintain order. This legal system, these laws, reminded everybody of their crucial, essential responsibilities to the Aztec Empire. Everyone, absolutely everyone, obeyed the laws, even those in the nobility class. In fact, if you were a noble and you committed some sort of crime or you broke a law, you were punished harsher than a commoner, because you, as a noble person, you should know better and you should be leading by example. Okay? If you committed a lower crime, a lesser crime, then you were fined. You had to pay a fine, just like today, or you were sentenced to slavery. We've talked about slavery in the past. Now here's where we're actually going to take a look at it. So slavery is a form of punishment in the eyes of the Aztec, not a permanent thing. So the lesser crimes, if you committed a lesser crime, you are going to be fined or sentenced to a period of slavery. If you committed a major crime, let's say you killed somebody, okay, then your punishment is going to be death. I want to focus on slaves for a second. There were slave laws. Slaves were essential to the Aztec world. They were necessary. But laws were in place to protect slaves. You could not harm a slave physically. Should a noble end up killing a slave, guess what happens to that noble? That's a major crime. That noble will die. Okay? So you commit a crime. It's a lesser crime. The judge sentences you to slavery. You now must perform certain duties for the person that you have wronged. You are their slave. So maybe you wronged a merchant. Okay, so the merchant is now the person you are listening to. You've been assigned to be that merchant's slave. You are traveling around the Aztec Empire. You are doing all the heavy lifting. You are carting everything around. Life is going to be really difficult for you. Okay, so you've committed this crime. You go to the judge. Now you are a slave. Well, in the market, if you can escape from the person who, air quotations, is in charge of you, and you can make it to the emperor, you have won your freedom. So if a slave could escape in the market in Tenochtitlan and make that 1.5 kilometer run without getting caught, so making that run to the emperor, then you are going to win your freedom. So you no longer have to pay your debt to society by being a slave. But there's a real gamble here, because if you get caught trying to escape, well, then your punishment is going to be even harsher, and you won't have the opportunity to win your freedom back. Okay, slavery was not seen as a shameful punishment. It was just your bad luck. You committed a crime. You did something bad. This is your punishment for you. Kind of like community service. Should you commit a crime, then a judge in modern day will assign you to some sort of community service. It was important to know that slavery was not a permanent thing. It was just a punishment. And you served your time. Whatever time you had, you served that, and then you are no longer a slave. After your slave time has ended, you go back to your land. Even if you yourself had your own slaves, you go back to your slaves. You've finished your crime. You've done your crime. You've finished your punishment. You go back to regular life. Okay. If you are a woman and you committed these crimes and you were sentenced to slavery and you had children while you were serving your time, your children are not slaves. Whatever position in society you were, whatever position you were on that hierarchy before you became a slave, that's where your children will enter on the social hierarchy. Even an emperor born to a slave woman can become emperor, as we can see here, right? Again, it's a very temporary thing, and you need to remember that, okay? It wasn't permanent like what we've learned in years past in other social studies curriculums. The Aztecs, slaves were a form of punishment. All right, I want you to head over to your notebook and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.